The rise of Timothée Chalamet has always been really interesting to me because with the exception of one film, all of his roles had felt similar to me until 2019's The King. Within the last 4 months, Timothée Chalamet has been the lead of 2 of the biggest movies for one of the biggest studios in Hollywood, Wonka and Dune Part 2. And with this has given 2 of the most polar opposite yet consistently amazing big scale performances we have seen from an actor in years. So today I'm going to be ranking all of Timothée Chalamet's performances. I'll be ranking the movies on screen today based on Timothée Chalamet's performance, and the fact if they're a good movie or not will just be a bonus. I'm not going to be including Interstellar, Love the Coopers, Don't Look Up, and Intergalactic because he isn't in the movies enough in my opinion to compare them to his lead roles. And as usual, the tiers we have today are bad, meh, good, great, and best of the best. And while I give you guys my ranking, let me know your ranking for all of his performances in the comments down below. But don't waste any more time, let's get into it. Starting off the list with The French Dispatch, this is one of the most unique performances in my opinion in his filmography, and I'm gonna put this at great. Now this might end up near the bottom of great by the end of this video, but I genuinely love what he does in the third of the movie that he gets here. I think this as a whole is about a 7 out of 10 movie for me, but again, he gives a very just out of this world weird experience, like a performance that we've never really seen before from him. Normally he's giving just this teenage boy performance, and here we kind of get that, but I feel like Wes Anderson's weird and honestly mixed up style throughout the entirety of this film allows for Timothée Chalamet to at least get something different in his filmography compared to his earlier works. And then we have one of his newest movies, Wonka, and this is also gonna go in great. This is gonna go right above The French Dispatch. This movie by itself is about a 9 out of 10 for me, a 4.5 out of 5. I genuinely love this movie. I would say this is in about his top 5 performances in general. I really think he's so funny and charming in this movie, and this movie made me cry like the 3-4 times I saw it in theaters. I genuinely love everything about his performance here. He definitely feels like a younger Gene Wilder Wonka. Like, you genuinely feel that type of character and that visceral energy throughout him. I think his chemistry with the rest of the cast is also really fun, and his musical chops are definitely there. So I think as a whole he just elevates every single other element of this film. And then we have Little Women. This is going in best of the best, but it might move down to the top of great just because I feel like he doesn't have enough screen time to make it comparable to like my top 3, but I feel like he's just so great in this movie.
I can't love anyone else, Joe. I only love you.
Teddy, it would be a disaster if we married.
It wouldn't be a disaster.
Okay? We'd be miserable.
Joe, I'd be a perfect saint.
I can't. I've tried it and I failed.
Why does everyone expect it then? Why does your family and my grandpa expect it? Why are you saying this? Say yes. Let's be happy together, Joe.
I can't say yes truly, so I'm not going to say it at all. And you'll see that I'm right eventually, and you'll thank me for it.
I would rather hang myself than realize this, Joe.
Teddy.
I would rather be dead.
I absolutely love Greta Gerwig's direction, and honestly I think that is what makes his chemistry with the rest of the actresses so amazing in this film. I think his character has such great back and forths between the rest of the actresses here, from Florence Pugh to Emma Watson to Saoirse Ronan. I think he just puts it all in, and he really holds his own against all of these other actresses. His character is one that is pretty relatable, even though he is kind of taking it from a very far perspective. He's not necessarily the center of this story, but he has a great impact on it. That's just why I think he plays such an essential character here, and honestly why it just goes towards the top of this list. And then we have Call Me By Your Name, and this one's gonna be a hot take. I think this is just good. Like, I think this movie in general is pretty overrated, but this is like the pinnacle of Timothée Chalamet's like teenage boy coming of age acting, and it's really nothing amazing to me personally. Like, this is the top of his very just mediocre archetype type casting of, okay, Timothée Chalamet is this skinny white boy teenager that we're gonna have him play all these different characters. Like, that was really the beginning of his career, and I understand why a lot of people like him in Call Me By Your Name, because that's the peak of this just white teenage boy skinny theater kid acting, you know what I mean? But he really takes it to another level after this, in my opinion. Then we have Bones and All, and this one is super unique. I'm gonna put it at the top of good. This is borderline good and great just just because he plays like that kind of teenage boy-y, but he also elevates it with just material that is so much more raw. I think Luca Guadagnino takes everything a step up from Call Me By Your Name, you know? This pairing was there in Call Me By Your Name, and you get this great performance from Timothy, you get this great performance from Armie Hammer, but in my opinion, not only is the concept a lot crazier in Bones and all, but Timothy's performance is able to be more balls to the wall. He's able to have just this weird, it's not necessarily theater kitty because it's not lively and joyous, but you can also tell that, okay, this is more of a serious, but also at times so serious that it gets kind of goofy role, but I kind of like that for him. And then we have Beautiful Boy. This is going to be a hot take, but I'm going to put this at the top of best of the best. This is one of, if not Timothée Chalamet's best performance of his entire career.
You think that you have this under control.
I understand why I do things. It doesn't make me any different. You're just embarrassed because I was like this amazing thing, like your special creation or something, and you don't like who I am now.
Yeah? Who are you, Nick?
This is me, Dad. Here, this is who I am.
This is not you. This is not you, Nick.
What are you doing, huh? You always gotta be controlling everything all the time.
Let me book your room
No, Dad.
at a hotel for a couple of nights.
Dad.
I think I'm biased just because I am a son, and I feel like the way that this duo of Steve Carell and Timothée Chalamet they go back and forth, punch for punch. The way that this relationship evolves throughout this movie hit me so hard. The first time I watched it, I wasn't really a fan of the movie itself. I was more obviously a fan of just Timothée Chalamet's performance. But after rewatching it very recently, not only do I love Timothée Chalamet's performance, but Steve Carell in the movie as a whole, I think the pacing is absolutely brilliant. And I also think just the way this movie is written, it's written in such a repetitive, but also depressing, but also brutally honest way that I think Timothée Chalamet really just puts his all into it, right? This is that archetype that I was complaining about, like, okay, skinny white teenage boy, all of his roles feel kind of similar. He has these like screaming lash out moments. I get it, but I think it's because the material makes so much more sense to me that I find this performance to actually hit much harder than the other teenage boy archetype things that we have seen earlier in his career. And then we have the first Dune movie, Dune Part 1. I'm going to put this at the top of great. I don't think this makes it into the best of the best, just because I think the best of the best has fully elevated every single element because of Timothée Chalamet. And I don't think in Dune Part 1, his character is even substantially enough to be considered the best of his roles. I think the evolution and the groundwork that he lays in Dune Part 1 is what makes his later performances in this franchise so amazing and what gives it so much of a greater impact. But for here, I would even go as far as to say the main character of Paul does have some stale qualities, but it's not necessarily such an eyesore because of all of the other elements that are absolutely brilliant. I mean, from Greg Fraser's director of photography to Denis Villeneuve being the director of this film, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Josh Brolin, Oscar Isaac, even Jason Momoa, David Bautista, Peter Skarsgård. The list goes on and on. Timothée Chalamet is surrounded by A-list talent here, and I think that's what elevates his performance, is because he's matching all of these amazing things here. But as a character himself, he's not really giving everything that he gives in his best of the best, at least in my opinion. But moving up the list, we have The King. I'm going to actually put this at the bottom of great. This is one of the movies that I actually watched in through for the first time when I was going through his filmography before Dune Part 2. And I think he does something so unique here that I have to put it at the bottom of great. I will say this is teetering the line between good and great just because I think he's doing a little too much. And I think the only reason why he's not a little lower is because Robert Pattinson goes a lot further into this than Timothée Chalamet. Like, Robert Pattinson fully gives us some batshit crazy French king performance, right? And Timothée Chalamet gives us just a little bit less than that, and so it doesn't feel as crazy. But for me, I think Timothée at least gives something unique here. This is one of those performances, I would say one of the few performances in his entire career that he really just tries something completely different. Like, he goes balls to the wall. I think he does a similar thing in French Dispatch, but French Dispatch in general is just a weird piece of media. It's a bunch of different stories. The King is pretty much a period piece, and so going that crazy for something, you have balls for that, and I respect it. And then we have 1 and 2. This is, I'm pretty sure, one of his first feature length or one of his first big movies. I'm gonna put this at meh. I don't really like this movie. It's a weird X-Men-like thing where he just really he puts on a performance in regards to, like, screaming match, abusive dad, he gets mad at him, silent treatment. Like, it's not a movie I can recommend. I will say, at least in comparison to something like A Rainy Day in New York, you get at least a character here, but the material itself is just not good. Then we have Miss Stevens. I'm gonna put this at the top of meh. Again, this is a very theater kid performance in my opinion, and it's not a bad one, but I really just think he fully takes this idea, at least this general archetype of a character that's in Miss Stevens, and elevates that in Call Me By Your Name, right? So I think there are elements of this that work, but nothing that is so substantial that's like, okay, yeah, he's the standout of this film, but this film in and of itself isn't anything absolutely amazing. It's not to say this film is bad, it's a completely okay average movie, but I think where this film succeeds more is in the, like, ensemble of our 4 or 5 different characters and their dynamic, rather than Timothée Chalamet's performance itself. Then we have Hot Summer Nights. I think this movie is actually pretty fun. I'm gonna put this at the bottom of good. I went on Letterboxd, and a lot of my mutuals don't like this movie, but I found that to actually be really, really entertaining. This is a very much archetype. Timothée Chalamet is playing skinny white boy in the summer. I get that archetype. I totally understand. But it's definitely like the peak of that, I would say. Again, not an amazing performance, but one that he does have great chemistry with the rest of his cast. One that is very entertaining. Next up on the list, we have Ladybird. This is going to go at the top of great. I feel like his performance in Dune is arguably better, but I'm so biased because Ladybird is an absolute 5 out of 5 for me, but he has such a small part in it that I can't let that completely take away from the fact that, okay, he's only in this movie for like 10 minutes, but I think his small amount of screen time really elevates this story, and it really adds a different mix into this coming-of-age story for girls. I feel like it's a pretty good implementation into this story. I think his pairing with Saoirse Ronan is absolutely amazing. I think Greta Gerwig directs the shit out of this movie, and this dynamic between Saoirse Ronan and Timothée Chalamet is one that I was super excited to see go even further in Little Women, which we obviously saw, and that was really amazing. Again, he doesn't have a massive role in the movie, that's why it's kind of hard to compare, but as being one of my favorite films of all time, I kind of had to include this on the list. And then we have A Rainy Day in New York. This one's gonna go in the middle of good, just because, and this is really frustrating to me, is because I think as a whole, this story is very situational, and normally I don't like that, but I found this to actually be a pretty entertaining story. Like, it was a pretty fun one that was filled with decent twists and turns, and it was just a fun little time, but Timothée Chalamet doesn't really play a character here. Like, I could see this just being this dude when he was in college. Like, it wasn't really feeling like he was acting here, and that just, to me, kind of threw the whole thing off. It's like, yeah, I'm ranking his performance, but what kind of fucking performance was this? Like, it just feels like he's a dude, and that's why it's just in good, bottom of good. Actually, I'm gonna move this down. I'm gonna put this at top of I can't put it at top because it's still an entertaining performance. I'll put it at bottom of good. It's still an entertaining enough performance. Again, it just doesn't feel like he's playing it. And finally, we get to Dune Part 2. This is going in the top of best of the best. I do believe that this is Timothée Chalamet's career best performance. I have a full, very long, spoiler-free review out for Dune Part 2 already. If you want to check it out, it'll be linked up here in the description down below. But I genuinely love this movie so much, and a big reason is that because throughout the entirety of this film, Timothée obviously gives an amazing performance. But what is so interesting to me is the fact that this character in the first third of the film, you would never think that the same actor could really pull that role off in the final 2/3 of this film. And on top of that, it's an evolution that we really see. And I was watching an interview with him, and this really made me realize it, is that his big messiah scene, and again, no spoilers about the film, his big messiah scene where he's giving a speech about a certain thing, that, like, you could feel the transformation of his character from the beginning of that scene to when he walked into that room. And just through that minute and like 30 seconds of screen time, you felt a full transformation of that character. And on top of that, it was in 2 different languages. It was in a made-up language and then English. So it's like him being able to just pour out this passion, and that's really what just gets the audience going in terms of believing that he is this figure. I think it's so interesting to see, and why I made this video is to see how he's gone from this archetype skinny white teenage boy that's playing this summer fling role to this massive, like, literally godlike figure. And I would even say in Dune 1, he is comparable to this very archetype little boy that he's always been cast as. And you see throughout the course of, what is it, like a 4.5, 5 hour runtime of these 2 Dune films, him fully transform into this person that isn't really identifiable as Timothée Chalamet. Like, you're looking at something like 1 and 2 and you're like, where did this guy come from? What, like, you don't get this character yet in 1 and 2, or Miss Stevens, or A Rainy Day in New York, or even Hot Summer Nights, even Call Me By Your Name. You don't get this guy and then you're like, yeah, he's Jesus. Like that, you know what I mean? Like, that's true evolution in someone's craft, and that's why I think Timothée Chalamet is such an interesting actor. But guys, that wraps up my ranking for the entirety of Timothée Chalamet's filmography. Again, let me know your favorite performances from him in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.